Hello, and welcome to the Rite of String podcast. I'm Kevin Sluter.
And I'm Matt Moreno.
And we are bringing you a show about orchestra teachers,
for orchestra teachers,
and those aspiring to be orchestra teachers. Many of us have taken on the task of growing a small program, but fewer have been challenged to build a brand new program from scratch. In this episode, we sit down with Dr. Deborah Perkins, a retired teacher from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, to talk about building programs from the ground up, planning international music trips, and also her time running the string ed department at Southern Methodist University. Deb's sweet dog, Dirk, joins us as well. Editing-wise, that's going to be real tough.
You can do it.
You'll figure it out. Hello, everybody.
So, Deb, I think for both of us, for Kevin and I, you're just someone who's just kind of done all of it in terms of teaching and, public school, high school, elementary, college, and just all those different facets. So how about we just kind of start with where you grew up and what is your background and how did all this all come to be?
Okay, I started cello in the 4th grade in California. And I picked the cello because my brother was in band and I wanted to be different, but I wanted to play an instrument. And we moved to New York State in 7th grade, and their orchestra was really good. And well, it turned out my instruction in California was not very good. And so the cello teacher in New York had to change everything with my hand position. He was mean and I didn't like him, but I was holding the cello wrong. I had violin fingerings in my book. It was bad. So I started in Wellsville, New York in 7th grade, and this guy was a really good teacher. He had gone to Juilliard, and he was an excellent teacher. I did not like him, but he was a great teacher. And so high school, I played. And then in college, I was going to major in math because I'd gotten mad at Mr. Perga, the mean teacher, and I quit cello my senior year. And so in college I went, oh wait, I'm not mad at my cello, I'm mad at Mr. Perga. So I went and found the cello teacher in Jacksonville University and said, teach me. And he said, after about a semester, he said, Deb, I think you should major in music ed. And I went, me? I was shocked that I could do that. And he said, yeah. And I went, oh, yay, I'm going to do that. So it was really neat. And then my sophomore year, I transferred to a really good music school. It's called Crane School of Music in New York. And it was hard to get in, but I had really, really worked those 2 years in Jacksonville and caught up to where music major should be. And graduated from Crane, and then I need warm weather because I grew up in California, and New York State's really cold. It's really cold. It never got above 50. It's really cold up there. So I took a job in Charleston, South Carolina. And the projects, I taught strings for a year. And that was interesting. And I found out how much I did not know, that I had not paid attention or just didn't know about teaching orchestra. And this fella came along and was teaching in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And he was president of our orchestra association for the state. So SCMEA, Orchestra Division, Dean Angeles. And he was the man that said, you need to come work in my program. It's in Spartanburg and we know how to teach orchestra. And if you come here and work, you're going to really be in a good program. And where you're working is not a good program. You can't build a program there. So I went, okay, you told me to work there, so I did. And I had 3 years of very difficult student teaching, paid student teaching. I was an assistant at a high school that went to the Midwest, that went to Europe. I assisted him in elementary classes, and I had my own junior high. And for 3 years, it was the hardest work I've ever done. He was difficult. He was borderline abusive. And I love him. I'll give him all the credit for everything I learned early. Mm-hmm. But it was tough. So then I said, okay, I'm ready to start my own program. And I married Steve, and we moved to Columbia. And so we moved to a town that he could start a business and I could start a string program. And we did. I was 26. So I'm going to start my program. I was so like, okay, I'm going to do this. I wasn't afraid. And I walked in and said, okay, I'm going to start this orchestra program. And 5 years later, I had 500 kids in Lexington, South Carolina. And now 10 of those kids are orchestra directors in South Carolina.
Wow.
You know, like one particular elementary school, 5 of them went into string ed. And they're my colleagues.
Wow.
You know, but they never leave the state. Well, there's only one that lives in Texas.
So when you got there and decided you were going to start your own program, how long did it take for it to get running?
About 5 minutes. They helped me because they started as a gifted grant. They said, we don't have the money to start the orchestra program. And you won't believe this, it's so cheap. For $10,000, it was a gifted grant. My salary came out of that. Maybe it was 15. But it was so little money that my salary and their budget, which there's no capital outlay, but I had $6,000 to spend on in-service for Deb. And that was the best thing ever because the kids all rented their own instruments and brought them back and forth. I mean, I had no school instruments in the beginning and didn't have a classroom. It was pretty interesting. But I had in-service for me. And through that in-service that I spent, I flew people in from all over the country. Every 6 weeks, I had a national clinician in my classroom for a week. And they said, what are you doing that for? Da-da-da-da-da. And I had the biggies from the nationals back in the day, in the 80s. Marvin Rabin and David Becker and Jackie Dillon. I could just list them all. But I had a revolving door, so my kids always knew there was a clinician coming in. And I learned so much as a very, very young teacher. So I was still like 26, maybe 20. Well, I married Steve at 25, so 26 when I started that. So I started 75 5th and 6th graders. And because it was a gifted program, I wrote in that they had to have class every day. So I saw those 5th graders every day. It was really neat. So no one dropped out the next year. Yeah. I had all of them there. And the parents, because it was a gifted, and I wrote the thing, said they had to have some aptitude in music and some interest. So all the parents in Lexington were wanting to get their kids into that program, so I had adding people. But the second year came along and they didn't have the money to buy a second teacher. And then now I had 2 years worth. It's like, what do I do? And it was hard. I mean, that was really hard because I had to follow the kids from 5th to 6th. I didn't have beginners that year, the second year. They didn't have another group coming up. So for a year they didn't have beginners. I just followed the same group up. How weird is that? And then the third year we hired a teacher. And then that was 1, 2, 3. After 5, Steve said, let's move to Florida. I went, okay. And then I went, oh, what have I done? Because I had built that program. I just got them to high school.
At that point, were you still by yourself?
No, I had the assistant.
The assistant, okay.
So I got them to high school, and I had to leave. So all that nitty-gritty that you do in the beginning, I got them ready for high school, and then I was teacher for half the program in 9th grade when we left. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a long story. I'm sorry. No, we moved to Florida, and then I got there and went, oh, it's not like it is anywhere else. You know, I went into the school and said, oh, and their programs were not the same, and it's like Dallas ISD a little bit, where it's run by the top of a giant corporate district. It's Broward County ISD. It's not like you have your small schools in the clusters we have here. Site-based management, management, so the teacher or the principal totally had control over whether he wanted a program and how much budget he would put toward that program. And to make a long story short, I basically found 3 schools that would invest in me and say, I told them I'd build their program. One had 7 students, one had none. They had just scheduled them all out. And a high school orchestra that had 12 people. So I taught them every morning at 7, and then I went to another school and then another school each day. And 3 years later, all 3 of those schools had full-time programs. And I picked one in the middle. I picked a middle school because I was just sort of wedged into a position where I couldn't teach at the high school that my students were going to. So I just picked the place I had some control. And I had 280 kids when I left there and moved here. So I've had to build my own job my whole life. And it's hard, but it's really fun. And then we got to Texas. Do you want me to keep going about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I got to Texas and I said, honey, if I have to build another program, I'm going to be like, have to have a straitjacket. I was like, no, I can't do this again right now. And so my old boss, Dean, said, just go get your PhD. Get your PhD. You need that graduate degree. Well, I already had the master's. Okay, I'll go get a PhD. And so that kind of gave me a break from teaching.
Yeah. For
those 3 years. So I commuted to Denton and did that. And then you do the classwork, and then you take your qualifying exams. I passed the qualifying exams, so I was ABD. And then my husband started a business, and we needed to eat. So I said, okay, well, I'll just go back to public school. And so I started working in Plano, and I got the job at Wilson Middle School.
Around what year was that?
Fall of '93.
Okay.
So I got the job at Wilson, and the lady there had done a great job. But the program was just like, it was about 120 kids. It was lovely, but I built that one up to 180. I mean, I always get it too big, and then you have to teach them all.
Yeah.
And I love it, but it's hard. But then they called and said, do you want to teach at Jasper? I went, oh, okay. So I took the job at Jasper. I figured that it would be a little easier on my body, but I didn't realize I'd never be home at night. Because high school orchestra, there's something every day. And at that time, we had a toddler. She was 3. So the next thing that happened was Steve came home and said, we need a house manager, because he was having to come home from Oklahoma to pick Kayla up from daycare so I could go back to Jasper and do open house. So I said, okay, I'll be the house manager. And we had by then enough money that he could support us and I could be home. Well, that lasted about 5 minutes, and then while we were home, I had to finish the degree because I hadn't really finished. And once we got the baby, I didn't really want to finish. It's like all I really wanted was to be a mother. And Steve Perkins said, you're going to finish. So he made me finish. He said, nope, you're getting over there. You're going to finish. And you can edit this out if you want. But it was really good. I finished in 98. And it was good because I was home. Half the world said, oh, she's going home to be a mother. And the other half said, no, she's going home to finish the dissertation. And I got to do both. So from 96, I stopped teaching at Jasper, and I finished 2 years later.
Gotcha.
And then 99, fall of 99, SMU called and said, would you like to teach here? And I said, that's what I've always wanted to do. Instead of teaching like 3 kids or 30 kids, I could teach the teachers who could also do that. And that was my dream. And it was really fun. And I lasted 19 years there.
Wow.
Just
newly retired.
Just newly retired. From there, I tried to make it 20, but I decided, I'm done. But it's still fun. I still miss it. I mean, I never had a bad day there. I loved it. It was part-time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part-time really work. And I think, honestly, I still love string ed this much because I got to do it part-time for the last 20 years. I mean, I still get to do it as my hobby. And I'm not in the trenches eating dirt every day anymore. I just get to do what I love. So it's pretty good.
So Jasper was the last place you taught? Okay.
How many years was that then in public school? Or from
total?
From when
18.
you first... 18, yeah.
18 total, and then 19 in the college. And then there were a couple years off where I didn't work in a school, but my professional years were 43. I did 43 years. I started in 75. A long time ago. Before you guys were born. I mean, it's like a long time before you were born. College teaching, I didn't really build a program at SMU. I wanted to, but it's a ivory tower, and they really want to be Juilliard of the South. So they're not really interested in music ed. They do have the program there, and the kids that I taught there were wonderful.
Yeah.
And their master's program has grown a lot because they can do it after school, or teachers could come down there in the evening.
Right.
But I don't feel like I built a program there. I loved the ones I was with, and I talked a lot of them into changing. Like Brandy Phillips. Am I allowed to use names? I mean, she was one of my string ed or pedagogy kids who was completely performance. Who's now, and I got one a year to change their mind. So, I mean, I guess it's not that bad, but I would love to have taught in a place that really, really honored string ed. But I want to tell you about the elementary strings because it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you can still edit it out if you want to. But all the years we lived in McKinney, there was no orchestra in the city. In fact, the string players in the town would fit in this room. I mean, really and truly. And the people at the MISD administration office, if anyone called from out of state that was moving to McKinney, they go, well, my child plays violin. And they go, well, here's Deb's number. And they had my number as a sticky note for the secretary that took the calls. That's how, I mean, it did not happen. And on and off, I would meet the superintendent and talk to them and say, okay, when are you going to start it? It's inevitable. No, we just don't have the money. We don't have the money. And we'd been here since 1989, so we'd been here quite a while, 15 years, before these two ladies took me out to lunch and said, Deb, we know what you've done, and we need you to start an elementary program. And I said, thanks. I'm not your girl. I'll see you later. I mean, I knew how hard it would be. And they said, oh, don't worry, it'll be easy. We'll make it easy for you. We'll hire the teachers. We'll pay the teachers. We'll have it all set up for you. It's like, okay. And then they twisted my arm. And before we sent flyers out in the third, fourth, and fifth graders, folders in every elementary school in McKinney. And we said, we're having a meeting at this library in elementary school. And the line was out the door. I mean, the meeting was starting at 7, and the parents we had tons and tons.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And then say, I'll get your form in by this day. We had 125 kids who signed up. I was, oh, okay, great. How am I going to teach 125 by myself? And I had set it up like I had taught it. Oh, I didn't tell you this. I taught it the string project, and we can edit this back in because it's kind of important. When I got my master's, I kind of revamped the string project at the University of South Carolina. I went in there and said, you don't know what you're doing. You need heterogeneous classes in the beginning, and you need a master teacher, and you need people to watch that teacher. And I got in a lot of trouble, but I changed their string project. It really did. And so she knew I had done that, and I know how to do string projects because I'd done it before.
Yeah.
And okay, we have to have classes 2 times a week. Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. It can't be Monday, Wednesday, because that's too much time in between. They have to have classes twice a week, because once a week they'll get worse. Said it better. So they set up, and they got us into the schools. And we had 3 sites. No, we had 2 sites in McKinney, one on this side and one on that side. And I started calling all my private teacher friends, or anyone that I knew that had ever touched a string program or touched a string instrument, and said, come teach for us. I'll teach you how to teach. So for 3 years I did that, and beat the bushes to find string teachers. And I wrote their lesson plan, because they did not know what they were doing. I just said, follow this plan and you'll be okay. Walk in the room, set up the chairs like this, warm up like this. And I have these extremely detailed lesson plans that I wrote for them, and said, follow this plan. And all the kids played the same music, and we got them together. And the first year, one of the 2 moms that talked me into doing this program, it was the worker, the wealth, and the wisdom. Okay, the worker is a lady who's a executive, I forgot where. And the wealth is a lady who was in town, and she's just help me with that word, philanthropist. Has a lot of money. And I was the wisdom. And so she hired the Eisman, the big Eisman stage, for us to have our first concert in the spring.
Oh, wow.
It was really special. And they played open strings. It was like they were babies.
That's something.
All 125 were out there. So what happened from that was, I'll fast forward because it's boring, but it's still a great story. Just to find the teachers was really hard, but really fun too. Steve was like, Deb, you are full time, because Sunday night I'm typing up lesson plans, and then these teachers say, well, Deb, I got a gig, I can't come teach on Tuesday. And we're like, no, you don't understand. You're having 60 kids come to your class. They were large classes. But anyway, after 3 years, McKinney ISD, we used to have those giant cluster concerts, and we had a huge get-together in one of the gyms, and we invited the school board and the superintendent, and they went in and said, okay, we get it. And so in 2005, so it was only 2 years later, we started elementary strings in 2003. 2005, they said, okay, we'll buy the teacher if you'll find the capital outlay. Well, that one, the wealth person, she fundraised $50,000 and bought all the instruments for McKinney ISD. So they all have cellos in the middle schools, cellos and basses.
Wow. And so what is the story with Kevin?
Well, Kevin was one of my instructors in elementary strings. He was this wonderfully gifted and super talented college kid that I had known since high school. And I can't remember how we got you involved. Was it with your mother?
Probably.
I showed him the bass bow the very first time.
Really?
He was in high school and said, no, you were in college?
No, I was in high school. Yeah. Because the band director, my junior year of high school, bought a double bass for the wind ensemble.
You came over and I gave you a lesson.
That's right.
You came over right downstairs in this house, and I showed you how to hold the bow.
That's right.
Isn't that funny?
Small world.
And then I remembered you, and he wasn't doing music ed, or you were doing music ed, but not string ed in college.
No, so I went in doing jazz studies for a year, and then I switched to music ed with strings. But I did spend one semester doing percussion because I thought, oh, maybe this would be an easier path. Then I saw the barriers. I said, never mind.
Barriers, and then the band. Then having to do the marching band.
Well, now that I witness it next door to me all the time, I'm like, it's okay. Yeah.
So anyway, Kevin was one of my instructors, and this was either the year 2 or year 3, I think, because we had elementary strings for 3 years that I did it. I called it Deb of 1,000 Days because I lasted 3 years, And then after a while I said, okay, I'm done. I passed the baton to Margaret Brown and said, okay, you have the school program now. We don't need that ES. So Kevin was my instructor. You taught over at Webb.
I did. I was just thinking it was Webb, yeah.
And I wrote down, I still have all those lesson plans. I think I should publish them for someone because it's good stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the worker or the wealth lady, she said she used to teach jazzercise. So she knew how to do a detailed timeline because that's how they do the lesson plans for the jazzercise teachers. So I did it like that. 10 till 4, do this. 4 o'clock, do this. 4:05, do this. And so it was detailed timeline that I could put in and tell them all what to do every single week so that every single kid could be pretty much in the same place. It was neat.
Did I have somebody else in that room with me? For some reason, I don't think... Was I paired with another teacher? I just can't picture it being me.
It wasn't just you. I think we had college kid aides. It was neat. We had all the teachers, and then we had a second teacher or an aide teacher that was there too.
My biggest memory is having them in those rows, and then I brought in a drum machine, and I put all the little unison pieces they were playing had a drum beat behind it because I was just that.
I bet it was so much more fun.
Oh, they loved it, but so much of that was before. It's almost like memories you might have before you learn to speak. I don't remember a single thing that I taught because I know everything else now. I don't even know what I taught.
Yeah, it was you. Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I remember you tried to teach them Pachelbel Canon, and it wasn't in my lesson plan.
Ooh.
It was okay, Kevin. They have to know this.
Yeah.
Or you wrote something because you're so creative. You wrote them a piece and it had whole notes in it. It was okay, they're 5th graders or the 3rd graders. They're little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really cute.
Yeah, I didn't know anything, but that's okay.
Yeah, it was great. And so all week long during the week, I would go and visit all the sites and just chime in and help them. And then to prepare for all that, I would do there's 18 elementary schools at the time in McKinney. So I would do all the demos. So I went in and did recruiting demos to every 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So we would do, one spring I did 48. I've done so many recruiting demos. But we got the kids, and there was one time between 2003 and 2005, I knew every elementary kid in the city because I would see them in Kroger. Oh, there's that lady that came and brought the string instruments. It was really cool.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going on and on.
Well, there's no more orchestra at the elementary level, or is there?
No. As soon as they hired Ruth and Margaret, the need for elementary strings was no more because we really couldn't give them the kind of instruction that you do every day in a middle school. And so it got phased out. And I left. I said, my business, the reason I'm put on earth is to start string programs. I know that. And I did my part. So it's okay, you're fine now. And they were. And they had the 2 people, and it was hard for them because, just to start a string program. But now there's 14 string players, 14 string teachers, and 2,000 kids up here. And they're starting to get good. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So I'd say even here in DFW, there's so many school districts that still don't have string programs, and just kind of thinking of just how today's world works. What would you advise to anybody thinking of starting a program at one of those districts? Who to talk to, how to approach the community about it?
The main thing is you have to make sure that all the pieces of the puzzle are in the right place, that the administration is all in, that the students know about it. There's facilities, there's money, there's budget. It has to be start right. Otherwise it will be it will not go well. There's been a couple of areas in our area that they started a program and it died after 1 year because either some parts of the fine arts weren't all in, or they didn't have the facilities, or the administration forgot to tell the guidance counselors to put orchestra on the cards, course selection cards. I mean, there's so many things that have to be going right. And Ruth Curtis, I don't know if you're going to interview her, because she's amazing.
That'd be great.
She was the one that after 2004 said, Deb, they're not ready. MISD hired her to do a 5-year plan. And so Ruth, being Ruth, wrote a 10-year plan, a 5 and a 10, and said, this is what you have to project your budget, your people, your staffing, everything, facilities. And they way outdid that. But she told me in 2004, after they hired her, she said, Deb, they're not ready. Because I was so excited that they were going to start the program in 2004. Because they said they were ready after seeing our cluster concert. And they weren't ready. They were excited, but they weren't ready. So they made sure that they had all their ducks in a row. So when it launched, it was very successful. So I would say you have to find the interest first. And even if you have to start an elementary program to get their attention, because I don't think McKinney would have done it on their own. They were hiring Dallas Symphony to come to elementary schools and play concerts and go, who wants to play a string instrument? And no one raised their hand because that looks so hard. So they weren't doing it right at first. But once we got that interest, we knew those parents. You can't say no to all those moms and dads
Right.
whose kids already play.
Yeah.
We have one child who survived elementary strings, went all the way through high school, and now she's at SMU getting her master's in viola performance.
Oh.
We have one that I know of.
So along the same lines, what about cooperating and communicating with the other musics that have already been established, such as band and choir?
Oh, that's huge. Well, in Lexington, the superintendent called all the fine art people in and said, you will support this program. He sort of told them. And there's an evolution of attitude toward the brand new kid on the block. And oftentimes they're just fine, excited about the new program. And so they'll go, oh yeah, come on. And then when the number starts going up, they get a little nervous. But then they realize that it will complement their program. But it has to go through this evolution of attitudes and just know to start a program is extremely fulfilling. Coming home the very first night that I was at McKinney High and there were actual high school players on McKinney High stage, I just came home and I started to cry. And Steve goes, what is wrong with you? It's like, there's high school players at McKinney High. I've waited my whole life to see that. I mean, it was so exciting.
Yeah.
But that was neat.
But you eat so much dirt. I mean, you really do. And just know that you're going to. It's fine. They have to go through all that, getting used to this new person and this new program. And forever they forgot that put orchestra on the cards in McKinney. I mean, a couple of years in a row. Like, are you kidding? They forgot it again. So you have to just make sure that all those things are covered and just get help because there's people around that will help you do that. Like throughout my whole career, my idols were great teachers, but they were the builders because those are the people that started those programs. And I know a lot of them, and a lot of my idols are now gone into green pastures. But the ones who really, really started, I think a good segue will be to go to TYO.
Yeah.
Because honestly and truly, for young teachers, they need to know if you want something, you just build it. You can build a program, you can build an orchestra that goes to Europe, you can build anything you want. Just think of it and do it.
So how did TYO get started? Because I just, honestly, the first time I ever heard about it was coming over here and having dinner that one night.
When we had you guys over, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first time.
Well, because it's really
even on my
organic,
radar.
because we don't really have any budget.
And
But-
for the listener, TYO is Texas Youth Orchestra. And do you want to just briefly describe what it
Yes.
is?
TYO is also now TYOC, but it's Texas Youth Orchestra and Choir, and it's basically an organization that we've put together for the sole purpose of traveling to Europe. And it's every 3 years, and it's a pickup group, and the students are nominated by their teachers. We basically invite students who have good character first, can play well, and students that you don't mind being around for 3 weeks of your life because it's close contact. And so I invite my friends, and my friends say, okay, I want to go. And they invite their students that they want to give this opportunity to. The parents pay the money. We don't do any fundraising. But we've now done 5 European trips since 2006.
And where all have you gone?
2006, we did Italy and Austria, took 35 strings. And I still thought that was a miracle. It was like, we really did it. It's like, wow. And it was really neat. And then 3 years later, 2009, we took full orchestra. We added full orchestra and invited the band kids. And we took a full orchestra to Vienna, Prague, and Budapest. That was a blast. We had a double-decker bus of 73 people.
Wow.
That was really fun. Then what comes after 2009 to 2012, we had back to a single bus to Texas Youth Orchestra, and we added the choir. Because my daughter was a singer, and so she had to bring her friends. And so we added a choir, and the beautiful thing is, we had full orchestra, and we really didn't have that many choir kids, so we made all of the orchestra sing. And so the orchestra became the choir.
That's great.
Oh, it's fabulous. Their musicianship just exponentially grew. And we toured British Isles. So we did England, Wales, and Scotland. And we had jackets. It was cold. It was really, really fun. Don't go to Europe, the same place that they're about to have the Olympics, because that was right before the 2012 Olympics. And it was really crowded and really expensive. I thought it would be cool to be there right before the Olympics. Not a good idea. Just they closed all the main highways. So we had to take back roads. But it was a great trip. And then 2015, we took 73 we went to Barcelona, Spain, and then all the way up through France, and did recitals all through France, played at Normandy, at the American Cemetery, and then finished in Paris. How cool is that? Our last day, we went on a boat ride on the Seine, La Seine. We had a concert in La Madeleine, and we went to the Louvre. And we pack a lot into the trips.
Still sad I didn't go on that one. That was
was
one we almost went on. Yeah.
And then we just got back a couple of months ago from TYO 2018, and we started now I'm already going blank. Oh, Amsterdam and all the way through Germany and Austria. Finished in Salzburg. It was pretty neat. We had 98 this time.
Wow.
Large group, 2
Choir
buses.
included?
Choir included. We had actual choir kids this time.
Yeah.
We still make everyone sing. And it's funny because we don't tell the kids they don't have to sing until it's over. So you know what? You didn't have to sing. We just said we're all going in that room. And a lot of the kids learned, they'd never sung in a choir before, and they really loved it. And the other thing that's cool about it is the choir will play, we did something from Mozart Requiem, and then select orchestra will accompany that. So the orchestra is the accompaniment. And we have adults that go, and we have a lot of pros. So we have key players on almost all the big parts, so the orchestra sound pretty good. Yeah. We don't play really hard music, but it's good.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you want something, you have to build it, and it's worth it.
So when it comes to building it, how did you build each trip? Like, did you go through a travel agency? Did you have connections overseas?
No, I had a partner that started the very first trip, was in Houston, and she and I interviewed 8 different tour companies. We went through the TMEA booths and just got the cards and called people, and we called every one of those references. And so we made sure that we followed up, and I'm really glad we did, because there was one company we almost went with, and the person called me back and said, I don't know why they told you that put me on the reference list, because I would not recommend them. And it was a company that we almost went with.
Oh, wow.
But we found a really good company called Music Celebrations International. They're former music educators, and they know how to put together a trip that's balanced between shopping, sightseeing, and lovely concerts. They find good venues, and they advertise it for you. So when you get there, you find little posters that say Texas Youth Orchestra. So the kids find those and they get all excited.
Nice.
And they find people to come to the concert. So it's respectable. It's not huge. It's not like standing room only, but most of the time we have good concerts. And so I found a good company, and then they dealt with the money. Mm-hmm. All we really had to do was, I shouldn't say all we had to do was because I do a lot. But I find the students, and I find the families. And we do that by having those meetings. Mm-hmm. Remember the meeting we had with you guys? Mm-hmm. Well, once we get the staff together, then every Wednesday from April and May, the year before we go, I have a meeting in some school or some centrally located area, and just show them pictures of the trip and show them what it's like. And then I tell them it's going to cost their parents a lot of money. And the parents go, where do I sign?
Have you ever had trouble getting enough parents to chaperone?
No. We have, and I tell the parents they have to pay the same, and we expect them to work. And this time, we had the best parents we've ever had, and it's because we expected every parent to do something. We have this creepy doll that goes with us. Her name is Lily. And Lily's gone on 3 of these trips, or 4.
And why?
Just, I don't know, like the Flat Stanley thing, just to take pictures of Lily in all these different places. Oh. Well, one of the mommies was totally in charge of Lily. And she took so much pride. She said, this is the daughter I never had. And she took really creative photos. And because the places we play are just gorgeous venues. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And so there's Lily. So every parent had a job, and that's super important. And the parents pay the same amount.
I imagine that there are a lot of, it sounds like there's plenty of very successful moments that have happened over the years on those, and very fond memories. Are there some particularly funny or scary moments that people traveling should be aware of if they're thinking about taking on something
really, really organized. And if anyone ever needs help, I will be glad to help them, because we color-coded our groups. And everyone says orange 1, orange 2, blue 1, and then each group named themselves. And so instead of ever counting off like you do when you get on the bus when your high school trip, we just got with our groups, and I just had to get the heads up from the one group leader, I got everybody. So we made sure we counted off that way, but we did leave one grandma at a rest area in Germany, and she was waiting for 2 girls. When you go to the restroom in Germany, you have to pay, and there's always a long line, because they really huge rest areas, and there's several buses and there's a bazillion people. And so these 2 girls had waited to use the restroom, and so this grandma was waiting. And her grandson was on our bus, and he forgot to tell us she wasn't there. So all of a sudden we get a phone call, Pat's not here, but luckily we had 2 buses, so the other bus waited for her. So those kinds of things do happen if you're not super careful all the time. So many wonderful moments. And this particular year, because we had so many, I think we had a few more just students who maybe were a little bit allergic to the rules and not quite buying into the fact that, yes, we really mean it this time. When we have a call time, there's 98 people waiting. If you happen to get stopped in the shop, or it takes too long to pay for your lunch, and there's so many issues over there with some place they wouldn't take cash, or they wouldn't take a card, and so they wouldn't bring our bill. It does happen.
Yeah, when we go on these out-of-state trips, especially now, we have a talk very early on in the trip. I was like, okay, there's regular Mr. Sluter that you deal with every day, and then there's your lives are in my hands, Mr. Sluter, when we go on these trips. If I say that we are meeting at this time at 9:30, you are there or you are on the first flight home. We cannot,
yes.
Your safety is number one priority, and the rules very much matter right now. And somehow they pay attention to that switch in tone.
Do.
Yeah.
99%. And all of the kids, we had a couple that probably weren't quite TYO material that slipped through, and was like, well, of course we'll let them go because they signed up. And these particular children, all of them got it by the end. Some of them took a little longer. We make them wear a lanyard, and we color coded the lanyard, so we knew what group you were in by what color your lanyard, whatever. That's a lanyard, right? The little strap around your neck. And every kid wears a lanyard and has their name, but not in big letters, so they won't be called out, but has our complete itinerary on the back. So if, God forbid, they got separated from the herd, they could maybe take Uber or take a cab to where we were. But some of them did not want to wear that. And it's like, you don't have to make it show. It just has to be on you. Where's your lanyard? That's how we checked. And we checked passports 4 or 5 times a day. Yeah. We made every kid hold their passport the whole time. It's like, I'm not holding your passport. That's your job. So you have to scare them. And we had a code of conduct that they signed, the parents signed, and said, you will be sent home. And we almost had to send a kid home because they have beer in the vending machines in Austria.
Vending machines?
You're right, a foot from the hotel room door. From there, it's like it was too tempting, and so a kid bought beer, and he goes, I didn't know what to do with it, but he bought it, and we know what he did with it, but he said he just put it back on top of that. But other kids saw him, and so I said, okay, well, and so we did not send him home. But he had to be separated from the herd, and we took his phone, and he couldn't talk to anybody for the rest of the trip.
Wow.
He couldn't play with us. He just had to be an invisible shadow. Wow. So that was hard. That was stressful on me. I've never had that happen. We tell them we follow the U.S. rules. If you're 21, you can drink. So we do have drinks in front of the students because I'm 21. But we don't get drunk, but we just, we have a cocktail or whatever, wine with dinner.
How about the airlines? I imagine you all go on multiple flights, and have you had any issues with being able to take instruments?
It's very expensive because we rent percussion over there. Well, it's expensive to rent the percussion. Our percussion bill was around $3,000, and we rented all this stuff. Everything: 4 kettle drums, chimes, xylophones, everything. And then we brought a lot. And we had a daddy who was a percussionist. And he said, I was a roadie in a band for 25 years, so I'll be in charge of all your stuff. And he did. He was great. But he brought too big of boxes. So our boxes weighed 90 pounds. And Lufthansa made me pay a ton of money to pay oversized weights. So yes, it's an issue. Never a problem with the violins and the small instruments. And sometimes Lufthansa looks at us and says, oh, musical instrument, and they let them all go for free. 2015, we didn't pay either way. This time I paid a lot going both ways. About killed my budget. Because I collect just an activity fee for the TYOC camp. But usually I have a little money left over just to buy music or whatever, but we broke even. And I actually use a little of my own just to pay. You're stuck. You're over there. You're standing in, Frankfurt Airport, and they're going, that'll be $3,000. It's like, okay, and all the parents going, they're not going to help. So, yeah, it's expensive. But you do have issues, but you tell the kids what to say when they're getting on a plane. So you tell everyone it's a violin. And if you're nice to them and let them know in advance where that's going, they're usually pretty good about it.
You rent cellos and basses when you're over there?
The kids brought their own bows. And I had one girl who was in charge of our bow suitcase. So we had 10 cellos that went. And so she brought the bow suitcase everywhere, and I just trusted that girl. I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl. She carried it everywhere she went. It was good. So many details, but it's all good.
Yeah.
I can see why it's every 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
You spend a year dreaming it up, then probably another year planning it,
yep.
and then
a year recovery.
Yeah, a year, yeah.
No, really, it's recovery right now. And then after we get back, I make a photo album. Sue Ewing and I sat and spent 6 Wednesdays putting together a photo album for the families. And then they buy that. It was $50. But
yeah. Has Sue Ewing gone with you on every trip?
She's gone on 4 of them. She's gone since 2009. As has Margaret Brown. Ross Patterson started going in 2009. He's gone 4. And then Amber was our choir director. She started in 2012, and she's gone on 3. So the people that go, once they go, they get the bug. And they don't not go again.
Yeah.
We had 6 music ed staff this time. It was good. And we had strong teachers with us, so I'd back up if I needed it.
Well, you want to hop into your college days?
Sure.
All right. Well, let's just kind of start. I mean, you taught, what, 18 years?
Or,
18 years at SMU.
Mm-hmm.
I did the string techniques classes. I did string pedagogy. And then for 3 years I did Mustang Strings, which is really fun. It was a non-major orchestra for anybody on the campus that could come play.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a builder, I said, okay, come on, I'm going to go build a string program and start one at SMU, and I did. It was really fun. I did it for 3 years. It was hard to build because on the university campus, the freshmen are, I want to play. The first time their mom's not making them play, they get to play for fun. And I had good kids. I mean, there's a lot of all-staters floating around those campuses that are majoring in something else. And I had 18. I thought, that's great. Next year I'll have 30. Well, the second semester they go, oh, well, Dr. Perkins, I just loved it. I had the best time, but I'm a sorority now. And they got busy. And so second semester was a little harder. I was like, okay, I had my core, but then I had to go beat the bushes again, which I did. And each fall I'd end up with a core, and then second semester and I would end up getting some high school students to come. I judged local solo and ensembles. What are you doing on Tuesday nights? I need some bass players. And so I got some kids, and one of those kids who was a 9th grader who ended up playing in Mustang Strings, he's a string ed kid at SMU now.
Really?
He remembered going down. So that's my one really success story from that. And then string pedagogy is really fun because you're teaching 14 internationals, most of them performance majors who could probably get into Dallas Symphony right now if they needed to. I mean, they're that good. And I'm trying to teach them how to teach. It's I know they know way more than I do about music and about their instrument, but they don't really know how to teach.
Yeah.
Or that they will. So that was basically it with SMU. I mean, I did those 3 classes. So I didn't do the pedagogy every year. I wrote the pedagogy. First 2 years I was down there, I only taught string techniques. And then I said, well, let's do string pedagogy. So they let me write the class, the course submission, and I just offered it, and they said, okay, you can have this class now.
Well, I think it would be good to discuss what your overall plan was for students entering their freshman year and where you wanted them to be at the end of their college degree. And did you have priorities for the students that you wanted them to know right away?
Well, you want them to know you want them to get experience in the field as soon as possible so that they can know what they're getting into, and get them actually teaching as soon as possible, teaching someone in observing programs. The kids at SMU would take string techniques their sophomore year, and honestly that was a little too early, because by the time they graduated they kind of forgot a lot. And so you have to make them write, like with a binder. But it's really hard to keep tabs on those kids. And honestly, the cold hard truth is a lot of them get socialized out. They get talked out of doing education because they think, well, I can just graduate in December, I don't have to student teach. And then they go off and do alternative certification, which is, it's not the best way. But my plan for them was to get them into the program and give them as much opportunity to come, help with the class, get out there and observe. But to be honest, I didn't really have a lot of contact once they left my classroom. I still knew them as people. When you're in college and you're playing high-level literature all day, you think that when you grow up, you're going to just get to teach that level all the time forever. So when I grow up, I'm going to teach college. I'm going to teach college orchestra, college band. It's like, yeah, right. Okay, good luck with that. You're going to have a doctorate and you're going to have to be a superstar. But they don't realize that. And then sometimes their private instructors talk them out of it. Some school, like where I went to undergrad in Potsdam, New York, there was 500 music education majors. Everybody majored in music ed. It was incredible because it was the only place I'd ever seen that they did not look down on music education. They said, we're all going to do this. And they're not mean at SMU, but they just don't give it. They don't give the music ed kids the scholarships that they do the performance kids. So if you want to go there, you can, but it's a $60,000 school. And we're going to give the scholarships to this person who plays unbelievably advanced over the music ed. So it's just hard. It's just hard. But, it's not impossible. I'm glad they have the program there. But there are places that are music ed more nurturing and just really building programs so that we can actually look for places that are teaching. James Minnick, you should put him on the list.
Yeah.
He's cranking out string teachers up there at Ithaca because he knows what they need.
We have 4 in the area.
Is it 4
this year? Yeah.
4, yeah. He's doing it. See, he's doing what I really wanted to do because Ithaca's a music ed school. I was going to go to Ithaca because I'm from New York State, but it costs a lot more than Potsdam. So my parents, I went to Potsdam.
Well, and I don't know the 4th one, but of the 3 that I know, everybody's doing a great job, immediately.
Yeah, and he has a string project there.
Yeah.
And we talked about doing a string project at SMU, and the dean said no to me because they already have a piano project and they use every single room in the afternoon, but also because I'm not like a spring chicken. And I could not see myself staying in Dallas every single night from 5 to 7, the after school time to teach. It's like, I don't want to do that again. I would love to, but to watch the teachers, it's very rewarding, but it's hard. It's just takes up a lot of time.
Outside of general subject knowledge, what are some personality traits students need to work on before teaching?
Well, they have to be friendly. They have to like people. I would see a lot of students that would go through they would try to already be intimidating. They were trying to put on their scary side, just I'm making a face you can't see on this audience. But they try to be too tough so soon that the students need to find their own voice with teaching, but they also really need to be themselves.
I talk about that a lot with, like, when we get a student teacher or something like that. It's like,
Okay, don't try to be me.
yeah, that never goes well. The kids see straight through it. It's very uncomfortable, actually. Just,
Right.
yeah, be yourself.
Be yourself and you just enjoy the process, and don't be afraid to make a mistake or admit you make a mistake. I'm almost too self-deprecating because I just say, oh, okay, well, Mrs. Magoo did this again. But I have fun doing that. But I know I'm smart. I know I could do it. But I act like the absent-minded professor sometimes. But you just have to find your way as far as how your personality is going to get along with those kids. And no matter how, all my years, my kids were very, they weren't afraid to talk to me, or they weren't afraid to, sometimes they would act out, but they always knew when was when. And that's a trick that a young teacher really needs to know. You can let them be themselves, but they need to know when it's time. And once they figure that out, then your life is easier.
What would you say is a common mistake that student teachers make?
I think what Kevin just said, they try to be the other person, but also they try to be too tough, or they try to be like their college director, or they take something a student does personally. Like I heard about a student teacher in this area a couple of weeks ago, and the child fell asleep in the class. Well, the student teacher laid them out and just said, I don't appreciate that, and this was not acceptable, and da-da-da-da-da. And like the cooperating teacher said, well, I would have called the mom and said, is this child okay? Or, what is the reason this kid is sleeping in orchestra? It's sort of hard to fall asleep with an instrument in your hand. So what's going on with that child that you could ask the kid and say, are you okay? Instead of yelling at him. Or there's a really good saying, and I'm going to have to think of it. Please think of it. Assume positive intent. And if the student teachers could remember that, and that's one thing I tell the kids, like I had the students at SMU had to do a binder, and they had a chapter of, Debisms or Perkinsisms. And I just had this huge running list of things that I would tell them. Don't forget the 24-hour rule. Do not answer anything that you're upset about within 24 hours. And assume positive intent. And so when a kid comes in late, rather than jump down their throat, just say, is everything okay? Or just assume that they're not late because they hate you or they're misbehaving. But I had a long list of those Perkinsisms.
I had a student one year, actually I had a set of siblings that were always asleep in my class. I couldn't figure out what it was. Come to find out, after being mad at them for falling asleep all the time, I wouldn't get on to them necessarily, hey, you need to wake up. But, they would go home and sleep for a few hours in the evening, and then their whole family would get up at midnight and go clean movie theaters for 4 or 5 hours. And then they would come into school the next day. So they'd be getting 3 hours of sleep a night, and they would be coming into school off of that shift from cleaning movie theaters.
Oh, gosh.
So it wasn't like they just woke up from it.
Well, they weren't staying up all night playing video games. Which we would assume.
Well, then definitely deal with that too, but...
Yeah, you do. And see, you guys have way more technology to deal with. Really and truly, when I stopped teaching, email was just started. The worst thing we had were long voicemails by our music supervisor. He would leave these endless voicemails because we didn't have email yet. The World Wide Web had just born.
Well, over all those years, probably dealt with a lot of student teachers. Do you have any, favorite or most inspiring moments that you got to witness with?
From student teachers?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I should say that. Let me think.
It's a tough time for them. That's a tough period.
There's nothing real about it. They're just trying their wings, and it's all pretend. And the kids behave when you're in the room. And if you leave them alone, you're not even legal. Honestly, the hardest thing about teaching college is getting the kids to listen, because they don't hear a word I say. I mean, they don't until it matters. So they have to do their binder in case they ever need it. And I had 2 or 3 from pedagogy call me like a year later going, I'm so glad I have this book because I'm starting an elementary program in San Diego. And she was a girl who was never going to teach. And she all of a sudden decided that binder was an important thing.
Yeah.
So they have to, I say, you're going to forget everything we're saying. But it's hard to get them to listen. They listen when they're ready.
So what are your thoughts on students who continue straight into a master's for education versus someone who goes out and does the field work for a few years and then comes back to get a master's?
I think you should go teach for 3 years and then come back and get the master's, because that's when you find out what you want to know. Going straight through, like a lot of the kids that I know are going straight through and getting a performance degree for their master's. And that would make us all nervous at SMU, because we would get these fledglings and they're so good and they're so promising, and they go, okay, bye-bye, I'm going off to get a conducting degree. But often they realize after 2 more years of getting their master's degree, they're starving, they're hungry, they don't want to drive a bad car anymore, they want a real job, and so they call you and go, okay, where are the jobs? And they come back. But I don't think there's any harm in going straight through. I think you can get more out of it after you realize what it is you want to know. Because once you teach a little while, then you're going to go, okay, well, what's the research behind? Like part of my PhD, I really wanted to know what happened when I built these programs? What was going on? Why did that work? Was it my personality? Was it the knowledge? Was it the success of the kids? And so that became the basis of my PhD, of doing a dissertation just on that. What people do to build a program and why the kids stay in. And that was always my question. You always have a question when you're doing research. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it really matters. It just depends on money, because they're going to be sick of being in debt.
We have been asking a lot of people this question kind of at the end. Just, you spent all this time teaching and teaching others how to teach. Is there any advice for people either just starting out in the career or in the early half of their teaching life that you think is valuable for doing it for the long haul, since so many people do burn out or run into issues with the profession over the years?
Well, I do have some ideas. I think that, I can tell you because this is how I did it, but I know this is why I had my longevity, is that I stayed fresh. I went to conventions. We didn't have children back in the 80s and 90s early, and so I never missed a Midwest for decades. I went to the MENC, which is the old word for NAFME, which is the music ed that's outside of Texas. I went to every single convention. I never missed. I went to ASTA. I was very, very active with my professional associations, and that's why I kind of moved up quickly, because I could be president of the I was president of the Florida Orchestra Association, because they knew I'd been president of South Carolina and president of ASTA. I was like, okay, I'll do it. That's why I've never done anything in Texas. Like, no thank you. But just stay active professionally, but go to clinics, because that's where I learned how to teach. I learned all my tricks from the biggest, best teachers in my 20s. And I didn't ever learn it all, but I learned how to stay, just how to survive. And the other thing is, don't take yourself too seriously and pick your battles, because no one really cares about string ed except for us in the world out there. They don't. I mean, and that's it just is. But when people do see the good that we do and that what the students get out of it, it's totally worth it. I mean, I don't need to be famous on, in Hollywood, but I think our profession is wonderful, and I don't know what I've else done. I mean, I can't imagine having this much fun teaching math.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Deb Perkins. The featured educational work at the end of today's episode is Ride That Chariot, arranged by Raynard Burns. You can find it at luxmusic.com. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, shoot us an email at rightofstring@gmail.com.
Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and join us for our next episode.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.